Okay, we're live. Hey guys, welcome back to DIY guitar making. Um, we're just going to kind of dive right into it. I guess first I'll talk a little bit about some of the crazy stuff I have going on here. The biggest thing by far is the fact that we just bought a new property. I talked a little bit about the fact that we were planning a move in the last stream. Well, we actually got the property and we are moving as soon as March 18th. Although the shop, everything in the shop, it's gonna take much longer to move all of that stuff. In fact, I probably won't even start in earnest moving everything over from the shop until like May. Okay, so that's pretty cool. So yeah, all you guys that are already in workshops, it's still at the same shop, still at the same location, at least till May, June, July, that time period. And during this hectic time period, I am just going nuts here in the shop, getting so much done. I'm working on some new dreadnought plans and dreadnought templates for a new model, and just batching out backs and sides, resawing, making new bending molds, all kinds of crazy stuff. Because with this move coming down the pipeline, I gotta kind of get ahead of everything so that I can afford to take the time to move everything over, right? Um, but anyway, just thought I'd fill you in on that. I don't have much else to talk about in the way of news here. So we'll go ahead and jump into the Discord and get your questions and comments. That is members of the online guitar building school, your questions and comments. And then because I haven't done this in a really long time, I think I am going to jump over to YouTube actually and get some of the comments there for you guys. So sorry about that. I don't want to forget about you guys every time I do a stream. And Tom asks, where are you moving to? It's a great question. It's only like 15, 20 minutes from here. It's a town called Robesonia. So we're in Burnville right now. It's a little south of here, about 15, 20 minutes. Okay, so not much is changing in regards to, the classes and where you go to take them. Okay. All right. So let's jump right into this. Let me share the screen here. Give me a second. All right. And why don't we start with Richie's question here on Wenge side thickness. And actually, I picked this one out for a specific reason, and it's because I just cut up a whole bunch of Wenge, and I will be selling it. I don't have it on the website or anywhere yet. So just stay tuned for an email if you're on my email list. If you're not on the email list, go to ericschaferguitars.com, get on the email list, and I will make that available to you, and you can get some amazing Wenge at really good prices. And on top of that, even more exciting, I think, is the ton of redwood that I've cut up. A lot of it has a really noticeable figure in it, and so it just makes for really stunning tops. This redwood. So anyway, that's that. But let's see what Richie has to say about Wenge. Richie writes, "Is anybody using Wenge for sides?" Well, yes, I am. Backs and sides. He writes, I bought some from Eric and sanded it down to 2.5 millimeters. Still seems stiff. What's the best thickness for bending? I would say for Wenge, 75 thousandths of an inch. Now, I know you just went millimeters there. Man, I hate to do a conversion live here, but let's go ahead and do that because I'm not going to guess at what that is. Let's see what 2.5 millimeters is in inches. It's 98 thousandths of an inch. So yeah, you're thick. You're still too thick. In fact, I don't think you can bend anything at close to 100 thousandths of an inch. It's just too thick. in the best case, the easiest woods like a rosewood or a cherry, um, ziricote is very easy, I find as well. In the easiest case, it's going to be 90 thousandths of an inch and no more than that. In the most difficult case, like Wenge, I would say fits that bill, you're going to go down to 75. Now, other people have slightly different opinions there. I've heard of people going less than 75. I think that's too thin. I really do. I think you're going to run into other problems uh, just with having too thin of sides if you're going less than 75. So anyway, yeah, I would definitely make that thinner. You're too stiff, Richie. And let's see, Larry Kuhn. Yeah, also recommends 75. He's saying, I'm now following the Rich Hall guideline that anything bends well at 75 if you do it right. I think that's true. I've never heard of that. I don't know who Rich Hall is, but that that really does seem to be true that you can bend any wood at 75. It's just, I think certain woods, if you don't have to bend at 75, it's a little nicer to have that extra thickness there so you're not worried about, splitting the sides later or sanding through it when you're installing the binding or something like that. But hey, when in doubt, 75. I like that as a guideline. Richie writes, I bent the Wenge sides today for my 00. Following your advice, I sanded them down to 80 thousandths of an inch plus or minus. And when he says your advice, because this is live right here, he's talking about Larry Kuhn's advice. They came out just fine, no issues. Thanks. Okay, good. Proof right there. It works. 75. All right, let's find a couple more questions in the Discord here, and then we will jump over to YouTube because I spent a ton of time in the Discord the last time, so I don't want to overdo it again. Sorry, I was just looking at the chat for a moment there. One moment. I thought I saw a question here that I liked, but I can't find it now, so I might just have to jump into something else. Oh, here we go. Yeah, this looks really interesting. I haven't really read it, but I like the topic, which is wolf notes. Wolf notes on a Cordoba. And this is from Rick Malloy. Okay, so Rick writes, the customer brought this in with a buzzing D string. It's actually got wolf notes, and I'll share how I'm attempting to fix them. Wolf notes, by the way, are just notes on your fretboard. So when you're playing, let's just say you're playing a scale and you hit this one fret. Let's say I'm just doing this randomly. It's the G string, fifth fret or something, and you just get a accentuated note at that location, like an overly loud, let's say, note, an abrasive note. That's a wolf note. What you really want, if you think about it in a guitar, is you want wherever you're playing everything to sound sort of equal from a tonal sense and a projection volume sense, and you don't always get that. All right, so that's a wolf note, and then Rick Malloy's got some interesting pictures here, so I'm going to throw these up. And what he's doing, I think I've heard of this before, where you are actually, what you're trying to do is use some putty to play around with little bits of putty on your guitar top to find and silence those notes. And look, there he is doing it to the back as well. But I don't know much about it, so let's read what Rick writes, because Rick does know a lot about it. He writes, so I don't think I can give it back to him like this, but I put poster putty on the parts of the board that are resonating at the bad frequencies, and that makes the guitar more well behaved. The tape is adjusting the Helmholtz resonance. Helmholtz resonance, by the way, is one of the most important resonances for you to think about and consider when you're building guitars. If you're getting this far into the weeds that you're talking about Helmholtz resonance, some people are just building guitars for fun, and that's fine too. But it's a very important resonance. It is the resonance of the relationship between the volume of trapped air in your sound box. So essentially, how big is your sound box, and the size of your sound hole. Okay. So the relationship between the volume of trapped air and the size of your sound hole determines your Helmholtz resonance. Okay, getting back to his question, the tape is adjusting the Helmholtz frequency. This is the bottle note. It's exactly it, like G2 or something. It's exactly okay. So he's saying G on the G note on the second register, and the back of the guitar is also resonating exactly at D4. All right, great. Okay, I'm going to read what Larry Kuhn says about this here. I'm just trying to find some more interesting and clarifying questions or comments about wolf notes. And Larry Kuhn writes, am I understanding right that one method to avoid wolf notes is to do a frequency analysis on the top and back, hitting all the braces and checking the frequencies? The key, as described in The Art of Tap Tuning, is to tune the meter to a concert A of 431 hertz rather than 440, so that if you always get frequencies that are on a note at 431 tuning, they will be off the notes at standard 440. The other key is to have a jig to hold the top and back by their perimeters to better simulate being glued to the sides. Does this make sense, and is it effective? And Rick Malloy writes, yes, that's exactly it. You can use the same frequency and analyzer, grab the guitar around the neck and hold the strings with your left hand so they don't make a noise. You're just muting them then with your right hand, tap in the bridge area about 10 times for about a second each time, and take the FFT of that. In the tool, FFT is fast Fourier transform. Probably said that wrong. You'll see that there are several resonant peaks that rise up, and they will correlate to the resonant mode, just like with the free plate, only they look different on a fixed edge guitar. If you Google Chladni patterns, you'll see images. You'll see images of. Sorry, trails off there. I don't think he completed that sentence. But anyway, he's saying so. He's saying you can look up Chladni patterns. Chladni patterns, by the way, are essentially. I'm just going to, put this in a nutshell. Essentially, Chladni patterns are if you vibrate a top, okay, and you can use like a speaker cone or something to create the vibration. If you vibrate a top and put some loose material on it, like sand, uh, then that sand or other loose material will organize itself into a pattern depending on the resonance of the top. And that pattern is used to analyze the top and then to make changes, to which then you can vibrate it again and check the pattern that you get. Very interesting stuff. And, when you're talking about FFT, fast Fourier transform, and Chladni patterns, that's all stuff that I don't get super deep into. I'm just vaguely aware of what it is. Very left-brained stuff. I am more of a right-brained guitar maker, so I tend to get lost in the weeds with this stuff. But hey, if you guys find this really interesting, I'm not going to keep going on this conversation here. It is fascinating. I've read it earlier as well. Um, but get in the forum and check it out if you want to learn more from Rick Malloy about FFT. It sounds like lately he has been doing a serious deep dive on it, and he has been sort of helping and schooling everyone else on FFT. So check that out, guys. And let's see what's going on in the chat here, if we have anything. Okay. Captain Willard says he likes 2 millimeters as the thickness that he uses for most sides. Okay, and that's 78 thousandths of an inch. It's about, yeah, it's about right. Okay, let's see. Yeah, let's jump over to YouTube. So give me one moment to cast this to the screen here so you guys can see YouTube. Still getting used to this software here, guys. So just give me 1 second. One moment, one moment. Should have had this prepared before I started, but that's okay. We'll get there, guys. Give me 1 second. Okay, that's funny. Honestly, I can't find YouTube changed their site, and I don't know where they show the comments anymore. Huh. Well, we're not going to waste a lot of time looking around there then. Let's just get right back into the Discord. All right. All right, we're back. Okay, this is great. This is what I was looking for the last time, actually. Okay, because Patrick is trying something similar to what I do on a lot of my builds and a lot of the builds that you guys have seen on my YouTube channel, which is the modified lattice bracing that I use. It seems that Patrick has started designing his own form of lattice bracing. I say lattice like that, so you don't suppose that I'm saying ladder. It sounds like ladder. Ladder bracing is just your typical back bracing where all the braces just go straight across like railroad tracks. But lattice bracing, and here I'll pull this up on the screen. This is Patrick designing a lattice brace here. So lattice bracing on the back is essentially where you cut a series of lap joints to interlock your braces into essentially a lattice like you would see someone use in a garden or something like that. Okay. And it just gives you a more even stiffness across long dipole and cross dipole on your back so that you get, in theory at least, you'll get more of a monopole pumping action, which is generally what you're after on an X-brace top. So it's kind of like we're taking the same theory of the top and applying it to the back rather than just doing the easiest possible thing, which is ladder bracing. So let's go ahead and read a little bit about Patrick's experience here with this bracing. And he writes, I'm going to try something similar on my current build. I'm going with a 4-inch square in the middle I have lots of questions about this too. How does the size of the square affect the response? Okay, so let's take that question first, and then we'll read the other questions. The size of the square. So the square, what he's referring to is when you create these lap joints, you're going to end up with this diamond shape or this square shape right in the middle, and that is an extraordinarily stiff structure. Okay, so you're creating a very tight part of the back, and which is why you wouldn't want the square to be too small, right? So the tighter, the closer you pull that square in, the stiffer and stronger that structure is going to be. And we don't necessarily want that because honestly, it's stiff enough when you have a that many joints all right next to each other. So the idea in for me at least is I like that stiffness and I like it to be close to the center of the back because then you're getting that speaker cone effect essentially where the the perimeter of the plate is looser than the center, and in this case probably looser by a lot, again because that structure of a square is just so stiff. I don't have a number about this, and unless I here maybe I can pull out a template and look at what I've done. I never measured it or anything. Honestly, I just kind of eyeballed it in and did what I thought made sense. You guys can't see this on here, but this template has some light marks on it to show the lattice bracing. So I'm just looking at it right now. Uh, Mine's less than 4 inches, but pretty close to it. Maybe I'm at 3.5 inches. I'm not sure. Um, I could measure that for you. Maybe I should. All right, let me do this real quick. Oh, I was right, dead on, 3.5. Okay, so yeah, mine's 3.5 inches. And I'm not saying that that's the right way to do it or the wrong way to do it. That's just how mine ended up. Okay, version 2, I made the square smaller. All right, so now this is Patrick again. And obviously not responding to what I just did, but because these are all old comments. He's saying version 2, I made the square smaller, 2.5 inches. I also moved it down to roughly align with the X brace. Okay, that's interesting. Let me think about that for a second. I don't think you need to align it with the X brace. And here's why. The X brace is based off of like the location of it, where it is and how it's splayed and all of that stuff is based off of where the bridge is, because the bridge is where the strings anchor into the guitar and where you get your initial input of the sound. Now the back has no such initial entry point for the sound, right? For the plucking of the string. It's indirectly responding via the air cavity, right? So essentially, when you pluck a string, the energy initially goes into the bridge and excites the top from there. On the back, it's totally different. There isn't a single point where it starts. It's then the excited top moves the air, the volume of trapped air, which in turn vibrates the back. So it's more of a distributed um, uh, response across the back, if that makes sense. So essentially, you can ignore. I wouldn't go off of the where the X brace is on the top. I would go off of getting that square centered on the back, which is not because the back is not literally rectangular or square shaped. It's not as easy as just measuring where the center is. You have sort of an odd shape. Um, if you ignored the influence of the waist and just centered it, imagining that it was square, you'd be too close to the waist, and the waist would have too much of an impact on the square as well, if that makes sense. So essentially, you want it centered on the back plate, but fudged a little bit down into the lower bout because the lower bout is wider. Okay. All right. And here's how it turned out. Oh, that's beautiful. I love that you did the ebony caps. Um, yeah, just like I do on mine. Those look really cool. Okay. Very cool. Larry Kuhn writes, looks nice. What was your logic behind the horizontal piece tucking into versus not touching the X braces? So at the top of his lattice brace, he has well, it says horizontal, transverse would be is the word we'll use here. He has a transverse brace. It's not a transverse bar. It's not like what's on the soundboard. It's just a transverse brace connecting the two pieces at the top, and it doesn't actually touch the lattice. It's just kind of floating there. And yeah, I'd be interested to hear that too, Patrick. He writes, it seemed plenty stiff from the X, so I just wanted that brace to keep the wood from cracking. Okay, yeah, that's great. Yes, sometimes, so it's essentially working like a graft then. In fact, Patrick, maybe if you think it's plenty stiff and that's the only reason you're putting it on there, maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to just make that a graft instead of a tall, stiff brace. Now, I will say, if you look at my modified lattice bracing, I have something like that, but it does connect across. Not saying that that's better. That's just kind of where I arrived at when I started experimenting with all of this. Okay. All right. Let's see what else we got, guys. Let's jump around. Hey, let's check out some new member introductions. Oh, and I wrote a lot in here, but I should have put this in a different channel here. Shame on me. Let's see. I'm just trying to figure out a good starting point because I haven't read these in so long. So we'll start. Uh, well, that's like a year old. Um, maybe we'll start in 2025. How about that? New year. Chandra writes, here's my meet and greet. My name is Chandra. I'm happily retired and just today signed up for Eric's online course, hoping to start playing my self-built beauty this summer. Well, welcome, Chandra. That's great. Happy to have you on here. And we got Benjamin Channels. And so I've talked about Ben here a little bit in the last one. So he's a great guy. He is running the nonprofit Resawing Guitar project. But let's see what he says here. Hey all, I'm Benjamin Channels, former U.S. Army officer and executive director of the nonprofit Resawing Guitar project. Check us out online. We run our participants through Eric's 8-day course in PA. I've built an OM with Eric and I'm learning the ropes. Reside in Arlington, Virginia. For those nearby, let's connect. That's great. Yeah, it's good to connect with people. And Ben has taken this class with another special operator. And before that, even we had another class where we brought in one of his guys from the nonprofit. So we've already had 2 workshops where I've already had 2 workshops with Resawing Guitar Project, and I gotta say it's like the most fun when I get those workshops with Ben and his guys. Just because I don't know, we just I think Ben is such a interesting and goofy guy, and the guys he brings in are just so great that I don't know, we just hit it off right away. And not only do we build awesome guitars, but we just have fun the whole time. So Let's find maybe another question, and then let's see what you guys got in the chat here. Maybe I'm missing something. All right, great. Yeah. How do you say that? Yeah or yar? Yeah, I'm gonna just go with Yair for now, and then you can correct me. Yair Lichtenstein writes, "Good morning, all. Here's a burning question about side purfling. I'm using the CA glue method where everything is taped in place before applying any glue, and those pre-laminated black, white, black fiber strips. Any reason why I can't cut my miters and tape purfling and binding in place without having the side purfling pre-glued to the binding? Seemed like it would be easier. What am I missing?" Okay, any reason why I can't cut my miters and tape purfling and binding in place without having the side purfling? Okay, so this without having the side purfling pre-glued to the binding. I'm sorry, I don't actually know what you're talking about because, and maybe you received some instructions from a video or something where they were doing this, and I'm not aware of this. But I don't think you should be pre-gluing the purfling to the binding. Um, if we're talking about fiber strip binding, so that black, white, black binding, which um, you are installing that at the same time as you're installing the binding. Essentially, you have uh, two different things that you're trying to manage at the same time. The binding strip and the purfling strip, and you're trying to kind of like wrangle them in and get them into the channel all at once while you're running the glue. Although he is talking about the CA glue method. Okay, he says, to be clear, I'm talking about side. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. He's talking about side purfling. You know, you said that in the beginning, but then I forgot. So yeah, let's okay. So yeah, what I do with side purfling is, sorry, let me get myself on the screen again. All right. Yeah, what I do with side purfling is I'll take a usually maple. It's a nice piece of wood for this. Maple or just a white fiber strip, and glue that to the bottom of the ebony binding strip. And I have what is essentially like a mini joining board that I use to do that on. And then you bend the strip after the side purfling is attached, and then you simply have a piece of binding that you're installing. Now he's asking, any reason why I can't cut my miters and tape purfling and binding in place without having the side purfling pre-glued to the binding? Um, yes. I mean, in theory, no, but practically speaking, yes, because you're going to have a really difficult time, I think. Maybe not, maybe if you have a different way of doing this, go for it. But I think you're going to have a difficult time getting that binding strip perfectly aligned exactly where you want it if you pre-cut everything and then glue it. It's going to kind of shift over a little bit. But in theory, I don't really have a problem with pre-cutting those and then just putting a lot of care and attention into aligning them. It is possible, so I don't want to be completely negative on that idea. I would say, yeah, give it a shot. Okay, great. Thank you, Tom. Tom writes, Eric, there are some questions for you to answer in the Discord at next live stream topic. All right. So I'm going to jump over there. I really appreciate that because today I'm so busy with the getting ready for the move and everything that I'm going off of zero prep here. So, and there's a lot in the Discord lately, so it's hard to um sometimes it's hard to just find your questions because there's so many different channels and things. All right. And Oh man, yeah, there's a lot in here. This is great. This is great. Thank you, Tom. Why don't we start with Larry Kuhn? Larry Kuhn writes, I have a Rikon 10 326 with its stock tall fence and a wood slicer 3/4 inch resaw blade. I have the wood slicer resaw blade as well. And by the way, I'm sorry, resaw blade, by the way. Okay. It also came with a resaw bar, but I haven't had any drift problems when I've resawn without the bar. I also bought a Guide Pro bandsaw guide that seems to help. That said, I've only resawn smaller material such as head plates and haven't tried resawing my own backs and sides. I may have actually answered this in the previous one, or talked about this in the previous one. So yeah, I think you'll find, Larry, that resaw bar really is going to come in handy. In fact, it will be entirely necessary unless you really do put in the work to set your fence for drift. It'll become entirely necessary when you're cutting out backs and tops, especially backs because they're denser too, and they want to deflect, force that the beam strength of the blade to fail and deflect more so than on the softwoods. So anyway, when you get into backs, that's when you're gonna want to pull out that resaw bar. Most likely, give it a shot with just the fence, but most likely, I have that same exact fence and resaw bar, by the way, so that works great. Okay, so let's move past that. More on this bandsaw stuff, which I think is great. Brian Bullard writes, what do you guys think is the best bandsaw blade to use for resawing? And then he also mentions TPI, which is teeth per inch. Like, what TPI do you recommend? Do you also think it's necessary to use a resaw bar? Okay, so I'll take those one at a time. The best bandsaw blade for resawing, like bar none, is the Resaw King. I believe Laguna makes those. I had one of those for 7 years, and I put it through its paces on a regular basis, and it finally broke on me after 7 good years of solid work. And that's really what you can expect out of those blades. They are built to last. They stay sharp because uh, they're carbide tipped. They're very expensive though. Very, very expensive. For a 3/4 inch blade, I believe you'll spend like $150. For a 1 inch blade, which you'd need a pretty kick-ass bandsaw to even use a 1 inch blade, you are looking at like $200 just for the blade. That's crazy. Some people spend that much money on their bandsaw. I mean, usually it's a little cheap tabletop bandsaw, but still, you can get a bandsaw for that money. But you're just buying the blade. It is worth it though. When you do this for a while and you go through the cheaper blades, you realize that, like, oh, spending $150 on a blade that lasts 7 years doesn't really dull. I mean, everything dulls eventually, but seemingly doesn't dull. It's totally worth it. I will say on the other end, I think there's two resawing blades that I really love. The Resaw King, which I just mentioned, and the I just want to double check this real quick so I don't say the wrong thing. And the wood slicer, which that other guy mentioned, but I want to make sure that's actually the blade that I got. Yes, from Highland Woodworking. Yep. Um, so that's it. Yeah, the wood slicer. And here, let me fix the screen here. Sorry, guys. Hold on one second. Okay, never mind. My train of thought, the wood slicer is great for, it's a lighter duty blade. You'll definitely break it if you put it through the same paces that I'm talking about with the Resaw King. So it's a lighter duty blade, but it cuts so smooth. And so it works great for, I think, smaller things, like I'm just cutting out like thin veneers or head plates or something like that, um, I might go to the wood slicer, which I have on a smaller bandsaw back here, rather than going to a more heavy duty blade. So I guess to encapsulate that, I would say the Resaw King, if you're planning on really going hard on cutting dense exotics for backs and sides, so heavy duty work. But if you're using it a little bit more lightly, maybe cutting out neck blanks and which out of Hunter and mahogany or something like that, and head plates and veneers and stuff, I would go with the wood slicer. And hey, even better if you do have multiple bandsaws, do both. Okay, let's check out the chat here. Oh, it was a great. Sorry, let's go back to that purfling thing for a second, because Captain Willard has a great question on gluing the side purfling to the binding, which we were talking about a minute ago. He writes, doesn't the glue soften in the bender if the purfling is glued to the binding first? So this is actually a fascinating thing, which I had that same question too when I first started doing this. And my answer to that is it has to. I believe it does. I mean, I can't see what's going on in there while it's in my side bending machine, but there's no way that glue doesn't soften completely when you're, cooking that stuff at close to 300 degrees. So what I believe happens is the glue softens enough that it would just come apart and delaminate from the binding, but because you've pulled down the rollers and um, threaded down the waist shoe and everything's kind of tightly held in place by those uh, blue spring steel slats on the outside. Everything's just sandwiched in tight. It just doesn't go anywhere when it softens. And then as it cools, it rehardens again. And I know this is true too because I have pulled out on occasion. It's kind of rare, like maybe one out of every 20 uh, strips that I bend this way. There will be a little piece of it down at the end or something like that that actually has like delaminated and pulled away and twisted slightly. Usually it's not a problem because I'm just cutting off those ends. In rare cases, it's actually, disqualified the strip and I've had to throw it out because of it. But yeah, it does soften the glue, but if you're using a side bending machine, it honestly shouldn't matter. Long story short. Great question, Captain Willard. And let's find another question here. Yeah, love these questions about resawing. Patrick writes, I've only tried resawing once so far. I bought some rosewood sides that were second grade to use on the inside when laminating sides. When I got them, they were 5 millimeters thick. So I tried resawing 1.5. It worked, but there was zero room for error. I ended up with two 1.5 millimeter sides, a tiny bit thin, but usable. I used a Jet 14-inch bandsaw. Yeah, that is funny because one of those things you first do when you first start resawing is you overestimate how much or underestimate how much excess waste material you should leave on there to be, sanded or planed off later. And it's actually, if you're being reasonable about it, you really, splitting a 5 millimeter board in half is probably just creating two waste boards. I mean, it all depends on the kerf of the saw, your skill in cutting it, and how well tuned up your bandsaw is. But yeah, I'd say at that point, a 5 millimeter piece is just not going to be split well. I tend to leave quite a bit of extra, just because I just don't want to spend all this time, and there's serious time spent resawing, and only to have a part of it be so thin that you can't use it, and then you just wasted that time and that wood, and you have to throw out that piece. So keep that in mind. Excuse me, guys. I had the same problem in the last stream. Must be getting something in my throat here. Doc Joe writes, I have a similar setup as LC guitars with the Raycon 14-inch. I've used it for resawing flame maple plates for some of my electric builds. I have also used it recently for my Zeracoat sides. Every time I go to Hearn Hardwoods, they keep correcting me when I say Zeracoat. It's a little annoying. They say Zeracote, but I hate saying Zeracote because I always want to say Zeracati instead. And I don't know, that just sounds funny, like too Italian. Sounds like manicotti. So I just stick with Zeracoat, even though I know it's wrong. And people can look at me funny and correct me, and that's fine. That's life. So I'm going to say Zeracoat. I have also used it recently for my Zeracoat sides. I picked up some Zeracoat as a trial bending project before using the sides that came with my guitar. That was so successful that I actually did not have to use the Zeracoat sides that came with my guitar back. Okay, great. So that was just a comment there. Nothing to say about that. Rick Malloy has an older Grizzly 14-inch with 3/4-inch Timberwolf wired at 220 volts. Yeah, I used to use, in fact, I still have a whole bunch of Timberwolf blades. Those are good blades, a good value, I'll say, at the price. They're not, it's not a hardcore blade like a Resaw King. So if you're, not ready to spend that money, Timberwolf is a great company to get decent blades from. And they might make also some hardcore premium blade that I'm not aware of, but I've always thought of them as just a good, approachable, good for what you pay kind of company. And he writes, I'm still getting some drift and considering switching to a resaw bar or sled. Oh, that's right. Someone had asked earlier, is a resaw bar really necessary? So let me answer that question. I think that was Brian Bullard's question. The resaw bar is not necessary. In fact, when I go to the Fab Lab at Northampton Community College and do some resawing there on their heavy duty machinery, they have their bandsaw set up for drift really nice. And I don't need a resaw bar. I just use that setup. It's hard to get the setups like that dialed in. So there's that. The resaw bar is more of a quick fix kind of thing. Let's say you're using your bandsaw you're not dedicating it for resawing. That's where the resaw bar comes in. Okay. Because you can use the bandsaw to, cut out boards for other projects or whatever you're doing. And then decide, oh, and hey, I also want to resaw this and cut a little veneer off of a piece. And the resaw bar works great there because you're not going to shut off your machine, open it up, and start screwing with the tracking and fence adjustments and all this stuff just to make that one cut, right? You're just going to slap the resaw bar on there and then carefully manage the drift as you go. That's where the resaw bar shines. And that's what I use here in this shop because that's how I use that bandsaw. It's a general purpose bandsaw, not a dedicated resaw. Okay. So if you're dedicating your bandsaw for resawing, I would go through the full adjustments to just have it permanently set up. If you're not, resaw bar, baby. It's the way to go. All right. How far in are we here now? We're almost at the hour. I don't actually have like a time frame for these, as you guys have noticed. I mean, we might go 2 hours sometimes, but anyway, I'll do a little bit more and then we'll wrap this up. How's that sound? Okay. I'm just trying to find something different here because we obviously have talked a lot about resawing at this point. How about this? Tom Casti writes, "Hey, me, DIY guitar making." Um, he says, "Hey, at DIY guitar making." That's my handle on here, guys. I'd be interested in your thoughts on UV curable finishes. I've seen some YouTube videos promoting them as easy to apply and good looking. And then he has the video here. I have never used a UV curable finish. Honestly, I don't have any thoughts on that. Rick Malloy writes, I've used this as a wipe on for electrics and necks, and I'm going to use it on my next acoustic to see how it does. I expect it to be good. Okay. And then Larry Kuhn writes, there were some guys from cureuv.com at NAMM showing off their products. They have various sizes of systems for this purpose and said UV curable coatings are commonly available. And then Rick Malloy responds with what he uses. I have Kuvo lighting and Clean Armor UV epoxy. I keep the light over my bench and just turn it on when I need it. So he's got some pictures here. Yeah, that is fascinating stuff. I wish I knew more about it. I really don't know anything about it. Uh, why don't here? I'm going to ask you guys a question. You could tell me this, Rick or Larry or Tom or anyone else who's has experience with this or is thinking about using it. What are the main pros of this finish? Is it just speed? Or are there other things that people like about it? You follow what I'm asking? Like, I just I always like, yeah, I might could potentially consider this for myself. So I'm just asking because I always like to hear what are the ups and the downsides. So you guys let me know what you think, what you love about the idea of UV curing your finishes. And maybe it is just speed, and that's totally legit because man, anyone who's done even a little bit of finishing knows it's not easy and it takes time. It's my least favorite thing to do in guitar making, honestly, is finishing. Okay, so I think that wraps it up, guys. I do have all this wood here that I'll be selling. Let me show you a little bit of it. So I'm not going to show you the Wenge. You know what Wenge looks like. It all looks the same. I say that like I'm down on the look of Wenge. I love the look of Wenge, but it's very predictable. It doesn't. You don't have like, you know, there's no figured Wenge or anything like that. It all looks the same. But let me find a cool piece of redwood because man, there's some really cool ones in here. These are unsanded, by the way. Sorry, I know I'm off screen right now for a moment. These are unsanded, but they still the figure shines through. I might have to open this up. Okay, I'm not going to open this up right now because I don't want to waste your time, but I just want to show you that figure. So I'm going to be selling these. I'll put out an email, and I have a whole bunch of these of varying degrees of figure. Most of them have pretty strong figure. Some of them are a bit more plain. So if you want something for your next guitar that's um, tonally an exceptional tone wood, redwood is an exceptional tone wood, but also has an aesthetic element that you don't normally get with your typical, spruces and cedars, unless it's a bear claw spruce or something. That's always interesting. But yeah, if you want a real stunner for the next guitar, uh, hit me up and I'll sell you some redwood, or just wait for the mass email that I'm going to send to come out, and you can buy it that way. Okay. So anyway, with that said, I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for tuning in. I love you guys. You're the best. Bye for now.